The cooling element lives is often near freezing, while the top shelf can hover around a balmy 7 degrees. The door is practically a different climate zone altogether, swinging wildly every time you grab the ketchup. This is the result of basic convection. Cold air is denser and sinks, warm air rises. The fridge's cooling vents push cold air from the back. It falls down the rear wall, pools at the bottom, and then slowly warms up as it loops back toward the front and top. If you place milk in the door, you're sentencing it to a life of thermal whiplash. Every time the door opens, room temperature air rushes in, and the door shelves lose precious cold recovery time. The milk spends hours in a microclimate that's far warmer than the label suggests, and that's why it goes bad so fast. An experiment using data loggers showed that the door temperature recovery after a 10-second opening takes roughly 3.5 minutes, while the back of the middle shelf recovers in under 40 seconds. That cumulative temperature abuse speeds up bacterial growth according to something called Arrhenius kinetics. For typical spoilage bacteria, the metabolic rate roughly doubles for every 10 degrees Celsius rise. So a milk carton stored at 7 degrees in the door will spoil about 18% faster than one stored at a stable 3 degrees near the back. That's an extra 2 days of freshness just by moving the milk. That's pure math. The cold air river isn't the only physics at play. You also have humidity gradients. The back wall is the coldest surface, so water vapor condenses there, which is why items touching the back sometimes freeze or get soggy. The crisper drawers trap humidity and create a microclimate almost like a miniature greenhouse. But here's a funny thing most people don't know. Certain fruits, like apples and avocados, release ethylene gas as they ripen. Ethylene is a plant hormone that accelerates ripening and eventual decay. If you put ethylene-producing fruits in the same sealed drawer as ethylene-sensitive vegetables like broccoli or leafy greens, you've built a tiny chamber of speedy death. The greens will yellow and wilt in half the time. The solution is counterintuitive but elegant. Separate your produce by their ethylene output. Better still, add a tiny ventilation hole, about 4 millimeters in diameter, into the lid of each crisper drawer. That hole allows just enough laminar air exchange to flush excess ethylene without destroying the humidity that greens crave. It's a simple fluid dynamics trick. The air jet from that tiny hole maintains a boundary layer that keeps moisture in but lets ethylene molecules diffuse out. This alone can double the crisp life of your romaine lettuce. And that's where the math becomes deeply satisfying. Now let's talk about the queuing theory. My greatest fridge epiphany came when I realized that a refrigerator is just a perishable inventory warehouse with a ridiculously absent inventory management system. In any well-run warehouse, items with the shortest remaining shelf life are placed at the front, where they can be picked first. This is called first expired, first out, or FIFO. But in our homes, we shove new groceries wherever there's space, burying the older items behind a wall of freshly bought yogurt. The result is a tragic lineage of forgotten containers pushed to the back, eventually discovered as penicillin experiments. The solution is to impose a strict front-facing queue. Design it the middle shelf as your FIFO queue. Every container of leftovers, every open jar of sauce gets dated with a piece of tape. When you return from the store, you move the old containers to the front left and place new ones to the back right. Your eye and hand naturally go to the front left, so the oldest item always gets used first. To make it even more automatic, you can apply a slight tilt. Here's a delicious little engineering secret. Most fridge shelves are adjustable and can be set with a 2 to 3 degree downward angle toward the back. That gentle slope uses gravitational potential to create a slow, natural slide. Containers, especially lightweight plastic ones, will gradually creep backward on their own, which means the front of the shelf naturally empties, pulling the next oldest item forward when you remove something. It's like a lazy river for your lentil soup. Combine the FIFO queue with the thermal mapping, and you now have a layout that actively fights spoilage. The coldest, most temperature-stable shelf, the bottom, becomes the home for your shortest-lived proteins: raw chicken, fish, open dairy. They get the precise temperature they need, and because they're already in the coldest zone, even a slight temperature rise during door opening has less relative impact. The middle shelf, your FIFO queue, holds prepped meals and leftovers at a steady 3 to 4 degrees. The top shelf, which suffers the most thermal stratification, becomes the place for resilient items like pickles, mustards, jams, and condiments that laugh at temperature swings. The door is reserved exclusively for the truly unbothered. Vinegars, unopened sauces, soy sauce, maybe butter if you're feeling confident, but ideally in a butter bell away from the wild swings. Eggs, by the way, should never live in the door. Not only does the temperature fluctuation speed up degradation, but the repeated slamming of the door creates mechanical stress that can cause micro cracks in the shell, inviting bacteria. Keeping eggs in their carton on a middle shelf can add nearly 2 weeks to their prime. All of this rests on a symphony of tiny calculations that most people never think about. Let me walk you through the actual model so you feel the joy of doing nothing while physics works. Imagine your fridge as a two-dimensional grid with a cooling vent at the back bottom. At any point on a shelf, the temperature can be approximated by starting with the vent temperature, say 1 degree Celsius, and adding an exponential decay term as you move forward horizontally, because the cold air warms as it picks up heat from the room and the items. Then you add a vertical stratification term proportional to the square of the height above the vent. In a typical fridge, moving from the bottom shelf to the top shelf adds about 4 degrees. So an item placed at the very back of the bottom shelf might be at 1.5 degrees, while an item at the front of the top shelf could be at 7 or 8. That's a 6-degree difference in the same appliance. By simply assigning the right food to the right thermal coordinate, you align the biological decay rate with the temperature profile. The spoilage of dairy, for example, is dominated by psychotrophic bacteria that have a Q10 value of about 2, meaning their growth rate doubles for every 10-degree increase. But because the baseline temperatures are so narrow, even a 2-degree shift changes the doubling time noticeably. At 1 degree, a bacterial population might double every 20 hours. At 5 degrees, it doubles every 12. Over 4 days, that difference produces an order of magnitude gap in bacterial load. This is why shifting your milk from the door to a lower back shelf doesn't just feel better, it's mathematically demonstrable. The energy savings are a side gift. When your fridge is organized with airflow in mind, air circulates more freely, meaning the compressor doesn't have to work as hard to maintain the set temperature. A fridge pack haphazardly blocks the cold air vents, creating hot pockets that force the thermostat to run longer. By keeping the back wall vents clear and allowing a narrow air channel between items, you reduce the compressor duty cycle by about 5 to 10% annually. That's a direct reduction in your household electricity consumption, and when multiplied across millions of homes, it's equivalent to shutting down a small coal plant. That's not an exaggeration, that's just scaling. There's also a psychological dividend. When you can see everything you own at a glance, you're less likely to overbuy. The FIFO-Q is a visual tracker of your consumption patterns. You'll notice which leftovers you consistently eat and which ones you always chuck. That awareness reduces impulse purchases and shrinks the weekly grocery bill. I remember the first week I implemented this system. I found a half-eaten tub of hummus that had migrated to the back corner and was 1 day away from growing its own ecosystem. I rescued it, had it with carrots, and felt an irrational sense of victory over entropy. That's the thing about fighting food waste. It's a daily battle against the second law of thermodynamics, and you get to win a little each time. The world recently tipped over a climate milestone, and household food waste is a chunk of the problem. It accounts for roughly 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, more than the entire aviation industry. The methane released by rotting food in landfills is a potent agent of warming. So when I say that a smarter fridge layout can help cool the planet, I'm not being poetic, I'm being precise. A typical family of